Écoute mon cœur, où es-tu maintenant? Il s'agit d'attendre toute ma vie.
What do you know? The strongest weapon in the entire game, it's also the crappiest weapon. So, today's video we're going to build a Boink, a Unga Bunga build. That is what we're going to be doing today, and this right here, I've tried so hard and got so far to be able to build it on a way that actually makes sense, because as you know, LSP, it's a very punishing game when it comes to heavy weapons due to how the enemy movements are telegraphed and the windows of opportunity that you have available to use at your advantage. And this weapon specifically, this is, yeah, it's the slower in the entire game, but it's slower based purely on mechanics. Now this has been buffed, not necessarily the weapon in itself, but because of the buffs that we had on the previous patch 1.1.2, the weapon got that much better. So we'll talk about all of that right there. Let's talk about the weapon itself first, and we're talking about a 31 pounds weight on our weapon. The patch has not applied to my game as of yet, but it should be better with you. This is a belt that we would be focusing heavily, that is going to be heavily reliant on the capacity stats, although granted with the changes that we have right now, you're not going to need it that much as I have in on my stats. We'll talk about that a little bit later. But now you can play around and toy around a little bit better with the talismans like this one right here. I used the Ghost Walk amulet, although this is not the ideal amulet for this weapon. You should be using something different, because for this one you should be blocking more often than you would be dodging, because one of the amazing things about it is that it has the damage reduction rate while guarding. This is a beautiful, gorgeous, amazing, and outstanding 70. So it's ideal to use this weapon as block instead of dodging with it. Although my mindset is already pre-established and I more often than not use my dodges, but that's just me, you don't have to. So this could purely be focused on perfect parries and blocking as well. The damage AR, when you reach Motivity all the way to 40 and you have the Motivity to A, it's going to be an outstanding, beautiful, gorgeous, and amazing 423, which is the highest AR that we have on the game. That's amazing, that's gorgeous, that's beautiful. What is the downside of the weapon? It's too flipping slow, and you will see that it resembles kind of like the Fume Knight in Dark Souls. The thing is that the enemies were not that fast and you had hyper armor. Here we don't have hyper armor. So how are we going to be using this thing? Well, basically you have your basic attacks, which as you can see it takes ages for you to do them. So what is it that we can do to mitigate that? Also the charge heavy, it just, you died 3 times while charging that thing. Now, what we do to actually make this thing viable is that we deal damage. When we deal damage, it's going to break the blade of the weapon, turning it into this amazing little something, which is very, very fast attacking compared to what we had previously. And the charge attack, it's also that much more faster. You're also going to see the number right there on the left side below your health bar. When is it that you have more speed with the weapon and when is it that you don't? What is it that I like to do to make this thing? Think of this weapon like the one that you would have in Monster Hunter if you have played Monster Hunter. The Greatsword from Monster Hunter. It is a high risk, high reward. This thing is going to deal the most damage of weapons in the game, and it's also going to deal the highest posture damage. The thing is that if the enemy hits you, you're going to get interrupted. So it takes time to master this weapon. Spoiler alert, it might seem you might shy away from it, but as soon as you learn it, trust me, believe you me, I killed the last end game secret boss. You know that one is very annoying and it is very aggressive, purely because of the sheer power and stagger potential that this thing has. So when it comes to bosses, if you time your things properly, if you play properly, if you learn to master this thing, you're going to destroy everything that is in front of you because of how much damage and posture damage it deals. So that said, the best attacks that you can be using. Dodging attacks are somehow fast, and they also provide you somehow of a window to be able for the enemy to miss the hits that they are going to be dealing on you. Also, running attacks are ideal because they are also quite fast as well, and the running attacks you can wind them because of the reach. So if you're going to be doing a heavy attack, it's a best idea to wind them, as you are seeing throughout the rendition of the gameplay that you are seeing in the background, to just time that heavy attack and wait for the right specific moments that you want to be able to do something. Beyond that, you can also use a Fable Art that is going to consume one Fable to increase the speed of the weapon. That is going to make it more viable, it makes it usable, and you don't have to prepare the weapon and attacking first. The thing is that the stone is going to go back to the weapon after a little short while, so you have to be very aggressive with this one, because as you can see, we already lost it right there, so we want to cast it again. If you're fighting against a very aggressive enemy, you don't want to be wasting those precious resources right there. One thing that I love to do, one thing that I like to do, and this, as you can see on the gameplay background, is going to melt down big enemies and bosses as well, is that you charge your heavy Fable attack with the one that uses 3 slots. Prior to patch, it already had hyper armor, now it has that much more hyper armor. That makes it amazing. Because prior to patch, even though that it did have hyper armor, sometimes you would get interrupted after patch. Now you shouldn't be interrupted while doing that thing, and one thing that I like to do is just charge the heavy Fable, then charge a heavy. At that time the enemy should be staggered. If not, they should be staggered on the first sense, not on the gourd mechanic, not on the Fable critical strike that you're going to have. It should be just a basic stagger that allows you to do the final stagger, and that is how this weapon works mostly. You have to be staggering enemies, and you have to be preventing the enemy from dealing damage to you, because when it comes to speed, you are going to be the one that's going to be losing. I want to stress very much that this is a very high rewarding weapon once you learn how to use it, but it takes time, it takes practice, and it takes learning the movesets of the enemy to take the most advantage out of this thing. But once you do, it's one of the deadliest one of them all. It's just that since we don't have basic hyper armor, it makes it so much difficult to use it. Legion Arms, Fulminous. Thing is that Fulminous has a V scaling in Motivity. That's amazing because we also want to be electrifying the enemy. Remember that when the enemy is electrified, they take more stagger damage and they also take more native damage. That makes this weapon that much more deadlier. I wouldn't advise for you to use any other Legion arm, not even Aegis. Like I said, the blocking, you're going to be using it natively with the weapon that has one of the highest damage reduction when you are guarding, so that's amazing. Fulminous, you're going to be using this thing just to electrify the enemies. I also advise for you to use the Electric Blitz Grindstone. Again, this is purely to electrify the enemies, although it is going to take quite a little while more for you to electrify the enemies, because this is a very slow attacking weapon. So yeah, there's that. Now the stats, this is how you should be looking like, and you should also have more weight capacity. The thing is that the patch has not been rolled to PC console ecosystem from Xbox, so that is a bummer, but the capacity should give you like a 59, so you should be mid-rolling, you shouldn't be slightly heavy, although if you are remaining slightly heavy, that's fine as well. The main thing that we want to do is just focus on the Motivity to increase that amazing A scaling that the weapon has, to get that thing to 40, to get that beautiful 423 damage, which is ideal. It's amazing, it's gorgeous, I love that. The Vigor 20 is more than enough. Again, like I said, you're not going to be attacking like a maniac with this thing. You have to time your attack, so 20 is just that sweet spot. After you have done all of that, you can decide either to drop some points into capacity, now that it has been buffed and it works a little bit better, and to increase your vitality. But ideally in your first playthrough, having 30 to vitality, that's just more than enough, so you can toy around and play with these guys right here. ARP upgrades that we need to prioritize. Fable slots. Fable slots are always so very important to us because they are going to increase not only the speed of the weapon but also that beautiful charge attack that it has. So the more Fable that we can have, that is always going to be all the better. Upgrades that we need to prioritize, it's always going to be Fable odds damage, that's something that needs to be said, but also the guard regain reduction. Every time that you get the chance, every time that you get the choice to get the guard regain reduction, take that because it's already pretty high. So remember, we're going to be focusing this guy on blocking rather than dodging. So we want to have this thing as high as possible. Perfect guard regain recovery as well, because like I said, we're not going to be losing that much guard. So ideally what we are building right here, it's a character that can stand behind the sword as much time as possible, and whenever you get those extra windows to actually do something to attack against the boss, we want to regain all of that health that we lost when they were attacking us in one single hit, that we're going to be able to do because of how amazing that is. And not much that there is to it, really. Like I said, it's a very difficult weapon to use, I'm not gonna lie. The challenge, it's going to be very strong, but I can promise you that when I used the entire playthrough to play with this thing, once I managed to learn it, it was very frustrating. Lies of P is a very frustrating game on itself, and I'd say that this is one of the weapons that adds a little bit of a extra learning curve, because it requires for you to have patience and requires for you to have preparation on your hits. I would be lying if I told you that I wouldn't like for Lies of P to have that beautiful poise system that we have in different Souls games that allows us to be trading hits with the enemy. It's difficult here because you're not going to be trading hits with the enemy. You have to prepare every single hit before you actually do something against that specific enemy that you're fighting against. So very high risk, very high rewarding. Like I said, the most damaging weapon, and once I did that playthrough, I was clapping every boss like you have no idea. It was everything just so beautiful, it was everything just so gorgeous. And yeah, you can molest bosses once you learn how to use this thing really bad. Like, I was able to end fights in just a couple of hits, provided that you know the boss's mechanics, and provided that you know when to take advantage of those little attacks of opportunity that you have with this weapon, which are that much more precious than with the rest of the roster of the weapons that you have in the game. If you like the content and like it, never super appreciate it. Now I told you today that you're a gorgeous and beautiful person. You're indeed a gorgeous and beautiful, beautiful person. I will be seeing you goddamn gorgeous and beautiful people in the next one. Have a beautiful day.
Te souviens-tu de moi, je crois, tu reviendras un jour, un jour. Écoute mon cœur, je t'attendrai même